welcome to our channel. You are now entering a unique space, where stories from the shadows are unveiled, and the hidden secrets of the human heart are brought to light. These aren't just fictional tales, but echoes from real life, poignant and haunting experiences gathered from anonymous sources. Before we delve into this gripping story, we sincerely ask for your support. Subscribing to our channel, hitting the like button, and sharing this video is incredibly important to us. Your support isn't just a huge encouragement, it also helps our channel share these stories with a wider audience, so we can all reflect, learn, and empathize together. Please don't hesitate to show your support right now. Even your smallest action makes a big difference. Now, let's listen together to this moving and haunting story, a narrative pieced together from fragments of real lives, proof that truth can sometimes be harsher and more surprising than any fiction. That night began like any other, promising joy and shared moments. He and his wife, hand in hand, entered the elegant party, where glittering lights and soft music created a romantic ambience. They were Daniel and Laura, the couple everyone admired, a symbol of stability and happiness. But just minutes after stepping inside, Daniel's world shattered completely. Emerging from the bustling crowd, the figure of Laura's ex-husband appeared. Thomas, a name Daniel always tried to ignore, now stood before him, a stark challenge. Without a hint of hesitation or embarrassment, Thomas approached Laura, pulling her away from Daniel's embrace, as if she had never belonged to him, as if their years together, their trips, their nights, their home were mere shadows before this very moment. Laura, offering no resistance, almost as if she had been anticipating this, allowed Thomas to lead her away. Right before Daniel's eyes, in front of countless witnesses, she chose another man. Daniel's heart clenched, a burning ache in his chest. He moved towards them, his eyes filled with questions, with the raw pain of betrayal. He looked deeply into Laura's eyes, eyes that were once his entire world, now reflecting coldness and finality. "Why did you decide to go with this guy?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling, yet striving for composure. "You're going to live with him now, not with me anymore. Is it really over between us?" Without waiting for Laura's reply, Daniel declared divorce right there in that crowded room. "We're getting divorced." His words echoed in the suddenly hushed space. The music stopped abruptly, the waiter with the champagne tray froze mid-step, whispers rippled through the room. All eyes turned towards them. Daniel felt exposed, standing center stage, his pain and humiliation laid bare for all to see. That night, Daniel lost more than just a wife. He lost a crucial part of himself. The foundation of his life, his belief in love, infidelity, all crumbled. He lost the ground beneath his feet, the identity he had proudly worn. But what no one there knew, not even Laura, was that this betrayal was merely the prelude to a chain of events far more devastating than anyone could have predicted. It was to unleash a new chapter of unforeseen pain and even darker revelations. In the deafening silence that followed his pronouncement, every gaze in the room felt like a physical blow. It wasn't merely the loss of his wife, no, it was something far more profound, far more devastating. It felt as though the very foundations of his existence were dissolving, crumbling into dust before his very eyes. Years of shared life, meticulously built upon love, trust, and mutual respect, were reduced to nothing more than a phantom, a cruel illusion exposed under the harsh glare of reality. He had arrived at that party with his wife, and now, in a single brutal act, she was gone, a stolen, willingly surrendered, to the ghost of a past he thought they had both buried. The public nature of the betrayal amplified the agony tenfold. He stood there, naked and vulnerable, under the judging eyes of acquaintances, colleagues, even strangers, each whisper, each averted glance, each pitying look twisting the knife deeper into his already bleeding heart. Shame, raw and scorching, washed over him, not for his actions but for hers, for being the unsuspecting fool in this cruel public spectacle. He had lost more than just a partner. He had lost his footing, his sense of belonging, his very identity. Daniel, Laura's husband, that once solid, comforting label now felt like a mockery, a brand seared onto his forehead for all to see. The ground he stood on, once firm and reliable, now felt like quicksand, threatening to swallow him whole. His carefully constructed world, his ordered existence, had been violently ripped apart, leaving behind a gaping void, an echoing emptiness where love and trust once resided. Yet, in that moment of utter devastation, amidst the swirling vortex of pain and humiliation, Daniel remained oblivious to the true depth of his predicament. He believed, with a naive certainty, that this public disgrace, this agonizing abandonment represented the lowest point, the ultimate nadir of human suffering. He couldn't possibly fathom that this betrayal, as excruciating as it was merely the opening act, the prelude to a far more intricate and sinister drama, a chain of events, dark and unpredictable, that fate, with cruel irony, was already setting into motion. The true weight of his loss, the full extent of his humiliation, remained shrouded in the shadows of the future, waiting to be unveiled with a devastating and unforeseen force. Laura left with him, believing in what? A rekindled flame? A second chance at a love long past? She clung to the illusion that she was rewriting history, stepping back into a happier past, a time before life became predictable, comfortable, perhaps even a little dull. Driven by distorted memories, by a desperate need to fill the void that had grown within their once perfect home, she rushed into Thomas's arms, mistaking the thrill of the forbidden for the warmth of genuine affection. She saw it as escape, a liberation from the invisible bars of her own making. Daniel, with his quiet love, his steady presence, had he become too predictable? Had his stability somehow morphed into stagnation? In Thomas, she saw the excitement, the passion, the danger that had been missing from her life. It burned bright, intoxicating, like a forbidden fruit too tempting to resist. She convinced herself it was love, real love, the kind that made your heart race and your senses ignite. But oh, how wrong she was. As much as it stung, as much as it burned Daniel to watch his wife walk away, abandoning everything they had built together, he held back. He didn't plead, didn't beg, didn't scream. He gave her the freedom she so desperately craved, the freedom she so foolishly believed she was conquering. Little did she know this freedom was nothing more than the gilded cage of a bitter prison, one she was willingly stepping into. What no one noticed that night, in the whirlwind of drama and whispered judgments, was Thomas's haste. His barely disguised nervousness, the subtle sheen of sweat despite the room's icy air conditioning. He kept his eyes fixed on Laura, yes, but not with tenderness, not with love. It was an unsettling impatience, the look of someone clutching a vital piece of a plan that needed to be executed before time ran out. Laura, blinded by the shimmering facade of recycled passion, was completely, utterly dazzled. She was caught in a carefully spun web, mistaking threads of manipulation for the silken cords of romance. She was not the heroine of a love story reborn. She was merely a pawn, a crucial piece in a game board that had been meticulously set long before that fateful night. And the devastating truth? She was about to discover it far, far too late. When she left him with a void, yes, but not just any void. It was a cruel void, one where pain hadn't yet hardened into hate, but was no longer softened by love. It was just emptiness, the hollow echo of everything that had been carelessly thrown away. Daniel believed, foolishly perhaps, that that was the end. He picked himself up, walked away, swallowed the bitter pill of shame like a silent poison, and desperately tried, to accept this new, desolate reality. But reality, as it often does, had other plans. It began subtly, insidiously, with whispers. Rumors started to drift his way, nothing concrete, just fragments of hushed conversations, knowing glances exchanged between acquaintances, looks that suddenly avoided his when he dared to ask about her. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. It wasn't just the betrayal itself, that open wound was already festering. No, it was what came next. She went into business with him. Business. They used the money from their divorce settlement, her money, added to his supposed capital, money that, according to her, was from a phantom inheritance, a mythical successful investment, whispered promises made under sheets still warm with deceit. She believed him. She bet everything. Not just savings, but the apartment he'd inherited from his mother, his car, even his life insurance, cashed out early in a desperate, reckless gamble. He even gambled with his dignity, if he ever possessed any to begin with. And Daniel? He watched from afar, silently, a growing knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He watched, helpless, as she walked further and further into the trap, until the day the bomb exploded. He vanished. Poof. Gone like smoke, without a trace, without explanation. Frozen accounts, forged documents, blank promissory notes, all in her name. All the debt was hers. The hit had been perfect. And the lover, the hero of her recycled past, the man who promised to rescue lost love? He was nothing more than a luxury emotional scammer. But not just any scammer. He hadn't just wanted money, he wanted to watch her destroyed. Because there was something else, something festering between them from long ago, an old pain, a deep-seated grudge, camouflaged beneath kisses and sweet nothings. A wound he had never, ever forgiven. And she, blinded by the illusion of a love that was never real, believed she was going back to a beginning, when in fact she was plummeting straight to the end. It wasn't just about carnal betrayal, no. That was a wound, yes, a deep one, but it was the realization of something far more insidious that truly hurt. It was the brutal awakening to the lie that had been their entire story. All those years, all those nights they lay side by side, all those whispered promises of true love, it was all a fabrication, a convenient lie. Hugs were calculations, looks were distractions, every gesture of affection, every tender word, just a desperate attempt by him to convince himself of something that was never ever genuine. And the cruelest twist? She blamed him. Daniel. Because he hadn't seen it sooner, because he wasn't everything she imagined, because he got older, because he became predictable. As if loyalty were synonymous with boredom, as if stability itself were a punishment. She twisted it, warped it, made him the villain in her self-serving narrative of escape. Months later, fate, in its twisted sense of irony, threw them together again. Daniel found her at the bank. Standing there, arguing with the manager, a pathetic figure of desperation. Pale skin, disheveled hair, swollen eyes, the picture of utter collapse. She spoke loudly, gestured wildly, her voice cracking with a mixture of anger and despair. Daniel tried to slip away unnoticed, but she saw him. And the look she gave him, that look was a gut punch. A raw mixture of pain, shame, and something akin to pleading. As if, with her eyes alone, she was begging for help, but without the courage, without the right, to utter a single word. In that instant, standing there in the sterile, echoing bank, Daniel understood. There was no going back. Not for her, not for him, certainly not for them. But what she would never know, what she could never grasp in her self-absorbed misery, was that after the storm of public humiliation, after the emotional shipwreck of a love that drowned in silence, something inside him had begun to reborn. And it was then, in an unlikely place, a small random cafe, that his path crossed with someone new. Someone who knew nothing of his story, yet looked at him as if she could see straight through him, and for the first time in a long time Daniel wanted to be seen again. But what still haunted him, what truly kept him up at night, wasn't the betrayal itself. It wasn't even the public humiliation, the sting of abandonment. No, it was something far more insidious, something that burrowed deep under his skin and festered. It was what he discovered years later, the real reason her ex-husband had returned. A truth hidden, locked away, buried deep in a past she had desperately tried to erase. And when he finally unearthed it, everything changed. What had seemed like just an emotional misstep, a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment, it was actually part of something bigger, something darker, something that involved all of them. Something that, with chilling clarity, explained why, even to this day when he closed his eyes, he could still hear her question echoing in his mind, a venomous whisper, "Would you still love me, if you knew what I did?" What did she do? The question hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. It wasn't merely about the infidelity, the broken vows, the shattered trust. It was about the insidious nature of deceit, the chilling realization that years of intimacy could be built on a foundation of lies. It was the agonizing understanding that the woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew, was capable of, what exactly? This wasn't just a broken heart, it was a shattered perception of reality. The pain wasn't just the loss of a wife, but the loss of an illusion. The illusion of their shared history, the illusion of her character, the illusion of their love itself. It was the sickening feeling of having been played, manipulated, deceived for years. The betrayal was a wound, yes, but the lie was a poison, slowly seeping into every corner of his memory, contaminating every cherished moment, every shared smile, every whispered secret. It forced him to question everything, to reevaluate their entire relationship, to see their past through a distorted, horrifying new lens. And that was the truly devastating truth. The betrayal was just the surface, the ugly eruption of a much deeper, far more poisonous well. In the aftermath of that disastrous night at the ballroom, nothing could ever be the same again. The news of the divorce, that scandalous public spectacle, spread like wildfire. Whispers turned into open stares, polite smiles curdled into pitying glances. Colleagues, mutual friends, even distant acquaintances, everyone knew, everyone judged. The perfect couple, Daniel and Laura, had imploded in the most spectacular, humiliating fashion imaginable. Laura vanished. She became a ghost, swallowed by the shame of her own making. Days bled into weeks, filled with unanswered calls, ignored messages. Daniel's silence was absolute, impenetrable, a crushing wall of indifference that echoed the gaping hole she had ripped in their lives. She tried to justify, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but her pleas bounced back, unheard, unheeded. It was as if he had surgically removed every trace of her from his soul, leaving behind a desolate, echoing void. Returning to their once shared home to collect a few belongings was like walking into a tomb. He had erased her. Clothes, photos, souvenirs, even the plants, everything that held a memory, a connection to their past, was gone. The emptiness was stark, brutal, a physical manifestation of the emotional wasteland she had created. It was as if she had never existed, never been a part of his life, and in a way she had been erased, not just from his apartment but from his heart. Thomas, in stark contrast, radiated a chilling confidence. He exuded an almost unsettling calm, as if everything, every single devastating detail, had unfolded exactly according to his meticulously crafted plan. He embraced her, offered empty comfort, hollow promises of a future built on lies and deceit. Laura, adrift in a sea of shame and self-loathing, clung to him, desperate for a lifeline, any lifeline, even one made of poisoned rope. Looking at her reflection, she barely recognized the gaunt, haunted woman staring back. Yet she plunged headfirst into this new toxic reality, determined, desperate to rebuild a life, any life, alongside the man who, in her distorted perception, seemed to be the only one offering a hand in the darkness. But the hand he offered wasn't to lift her up, it was to drag her further down into the abyss. In the wreckage of that ballroom night, nothing remained untouched. The aftermath descended like a suffocating shroud. Divorce, once a whispered possibility, became a glaring headline, a town crier's bell rung through their social circles. Colleagues, friends, once admiring, now averted their gazes, their smiles replaced with thinly veiled pity. The picture-perfect couple, Daniel and Laura, now a cautionary tale, a public spectacle of marital implosion. Laura became a phantom. She retreated, vanished into the shadows of her own making. Days dissolved into a blur of isolation and regret. Daniel's phone remained stubbornly silent, his digital ghost a constant, biting reminder of his emotional withdrawal. Her messages, desperate pleas for understanding, for a flicker of forgiveness, were met with nothing but the echoing void of his resolute silence. It was a fortress of indifference, a mirror reflecting the vast emptiness she herself had carved into their shared life. Returning to what was once home to retrieve scattered remnants of her life felt like trespassing in a mausoleum. Daniel had meticulously purged every trace of her presence. Clothes, photographs, memories solidified in print, vanished. Souvenirs of shared joys, tokens of affection, all expunged. Even the living, breathing plants, once symbols of their shared growth, were gone. The apartment stood stark, sterile, a chilling testament to her complete erasure. It was as if she had never existed, a phantom limb where a life had once been vibrant and real. And in a way she had been erased not just from their apartment, but from the very fabric of his memory, his heart. Thomas, however, was a stark, unsettling contrast. He emanated a chilling calm, a predatory confidence that sent shivers down her spine, even as she desperately sought solace in his embrace. His reassurances, his promises of a fresh start, felt hollow, yet she clung to them with a desperate ferocity. Gazing into a mirror, the stranger staring back was gaunt, haunted, barely recognizable as the woman she once was. Yet, driven by a desperate need for redemption, for something to anchor herself to, she plunged headlong into this toxic new reality. She grasped at Thomas as a lifeline, failing to see that the hand extended wasn't to pull her ashore, but to drag her deeper into the very abyss she had helped create. But amidst the ruins, amidst the ashes of his shattered life, something unexpected began to stir within Daniel. After the cataclysm of public humiliation, after the soul-crushing shipwreck of a love drowned in deafening silence, something impossibly began to reborn. It was faint, fragile, barely a flicker in the vast darkness that had engulfed him, but it was there. A tiny ember of resilience refusing to be extinguished. He had weathered the storm, survived the impossible. The pain was still raw, a gaping wound in his soul, but it was no longer all-consuming. He had faced the abyss, stared into the void, and somehow, hadn't been swallowed whole. He was still standing, battered, bruised, but standing. And then, in the most unlikely of places, a small, unassuming cafe, amidst the clatter of coffee cups and murmured conversations, his path intersected with her. A stranger. Someone who knew nothing of his shattered past, nothing of the public spectacle, nothing of the gaping hole in his heart. Yet when she looked at him, she saw him. Truly saw him. Not the broken man, not the humiliated husband, but him. As if she possessed some uncanny ability to see beyond the carefully constructed walls he had erected, to glimpse the flicker of life still burning within. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Daniel felt a stirring of hope. A tentative, fragile tendril reaching out from the barren landscape of his heart. He wanted to be seen again. Not as the victim, not as the discarded husband, but as himself. Just Daniel. However, as shadows still lingered, a persistent unease that gnawed at the edges of his nascent hope. What still kept him awake in the long, silent nights was not the betrayal itself, not the agonizing fall from grace. No, it was the gnawing mystery, the unresolved question that echoed in his mind, a chilling whisper from the ghost of his past. What was the real reason for her ex-husband's return? What truth lay buried beneath the layers of deceit and betrayal? What was the secret she so desperately tried to conceal? Would you still love me, if you knew what I did? Her haunting question, a poisoned arrow from the past, continued to pierce the fragile shield of his newfound peace, a constant reminder that their story was far from over. But the question lingered, a persistent, gnawing unease that refused to be silenced. Would you still love me, if you knew what I did? Laura's whispered words, a chilling echo from the wreckage of their marriage, haunted Daniel's waking hours and invaded his dreams. It wasn't the betrayal itself that clawed at him. It was the implication behind those words, the sense of a deeper, darker secret lurking beneath the surface of her infidelity. What had she done? What hidden transgression was so terrible, so unforgivable, that it could make her question the very foundation of his love? The betrayal was painful, yes, but it was, in a twisted way, understandable. Passion, desire, weakness, these were human failings, however devastating. But her question hinted at something far more sinister, something that transcended mere marital transgression. He found himself obsessing over it, replaying their years together, searching for clues, for hints of this hidden truth. Every shared moment, every whispered secret, every averted glance was now scrutinized under a harsh, suspicious light. Was their entire relationship built on a lie? Had he been blind, willfully ignorant, to the darkness that had always resided within her? The more he pondered, the more unsettling the question became. It wasn't just about infidelity anymore, it was about the very nature of their relationship, the true character of the woman he had loved and lost. Was she capable of something truly terrible? Something that would irrevocably shatter his perception of her, of their past, of everything he thought he knew? The truth, he sensed, was out there, buried beneath layers of deceit and denial, locked away in the secret chambers of her past. And he knew with a chilling certainty that until he unearthed it, until he confronted the darkness that Laura had so carefully concealed, he would never truly be free. The betrayal was just the symptom. The secret was the disease, slowly poisoning his peace of mind, keeping him tethered to a past he desperately needed to escape. And the answer, he feared, would be more devastating than anything he could possibly imagine. Then Daniel revealed it. The chilling truth, the devastating secret that Laura had so desperately tried to bury. Thomas hadn't returned by chance. It wasn't some whimsical twist of fate or a genuine rekindling of old flames. No, it was orchestrated. Meticulously, coldly, deliberately orchestrated from the very first coffee, from the very first seemingly innocuous message. Thomas, Daniel explained, had lost everything because of Laura. Years ago. Anonymously. She had reported him for an ethical breach within their shared company. A quiet, unseen act, but with catastrophic consequences. The scandal, though it didn't lead to arrest, had pulverized his career, his reputation. He became a pariah, untouchable, unemployable. A promising name reduced to utter anonymity. And he knew. He always knew it was her. A careless comment, an access code only she possessed, a sequence of subtle, damning coincidences. He had tried to confront her back then years ago, desperate for answers, for acknowledgement. But she had vehemently denied it, looked him straight in the eye and lied, swallowed the truth like poison, leaving him to choke on the bitter taste of injustice and unanswered questions. Daniel had unearthed this chilling backstory after the divorce, a chance encounter with a former colleague of Thomas's, a loose thread that unraveled a tapestry of deceit. Thomas had confided his plan, his venomous plan, to this colleague. His return was solely for revenge, to utterly ruin Laura, not for money but out of twisted pride, a burning, personal vendetta. And it had worked, hadn't it? The silence that followed Daniel's revelation was piercing, heavy with unspoken accusations and crushing guilt. Laura was stunned, speechless, astonished. Tears welled again, not tears of simple sadness, but tears of raw despair, of soul-deep shame. Daniel, witnessing her utter devastation, simply whispered, his voice low but firm, that she had dug her own ruin with her own hands. He felt no need for further punishment, no desire for vengeance. She had inflicted a far greater torment upon herself than he ever could. Before leaving, he placed an envelope on the table. Inside, a copy of the dossier, the cold, hard proof of Thomas's meticulously crafted revenge, the final damning nail in her emotional coffin. He left her there, shattered, broken, the unwitting architect of her own devastating downfall. Laura sat there, frozen, the weight of Daniel's words crushing her. The dossier, the proof, lay unopened on the table, a silent accusation. The woman once admired, loved, desired, now found herself utterly alone. Betrayed, yes, but more devastatingly used and destroyed by her own choices. The irony was brutal, unbearable. She had sought escape, excitement, a return to a youthful passion, and instead had walked blindly into a meticulously crafted trap, a cage of her own making. For the first time, the full magnitude of her actions crashed down upon her. The betrayal of Daniel, the reckless pursuit of a phantom love, the devastating financial ruin, it was all her fault. Hers. The price of her choices, the consequence of her deceit, was now a crushing weight, threatening to suffocate her. Lost, adrift in a sea of self-loathing and despair, she decided on the only course of action that felt remotely possible: face Daniel. Not for forgiveness, not for reconciliation. Those were fantasies she no longer dared to entertain. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps desperation, perhaps a flicker of hope that even she couldn't extinguish. Or maybe, just maybe, she simply needed to be heard. She found him in their old haunt, a small cafe where they used to spend Saturdays, a ghost of happier times. He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, then returned to his notebook, pen still poised above the page. She sat opposite him, tears welling but strangely silent. He didn't speak, didn't acknowledge her presence beyond a brief, fleeting glance. Laura began to speak, the words tumbling out in a rush, a torrent of confession. The affair with Thomas, the investment, the scam, the devastating escape, she laid it all bare, raw honesty stripped of any self-pity. Anger at herself, at her own blindness, at the catastrophic choices she had made, fueled her confession. Daniel listened in silence, his gaze steady, distant, as if observing a specimen, something already dead yet still inexplicably moving. When she finally finished, breathless, broken, Laura took a shaky breath and said, I just wanted you to know. Not an apology, not a plea for forgiveness. Just a raw, desperate need to be heard, to unburden herself to the one person who had witnessed her fall from grace. And in his silence she found a strange, unexpected form of absolution. Daniel's words hung in the air, heavy, final. Laura was left to grapple with the brutal aftermath, the desolate landscape of her shattered life. The months that followed were a blur of agonizing self-reflection, a descent into the abyss of her own making. Shame clung to her like a shroud, a constant, suffocating weight. She was adrift, a phantom limb of her former self, haunted by the ghost of who she used to be, who she thought she was. The world, once vibrant and full of promise, now seemed muted, gray, devoid of hope. Each day was an uphill battle, a Sisyphean task of simply getting out of bed, facing the crushing reality of her choices. The vibrant, confident woman she once knew was gone, replaced by a fragile, broken shell, struggling to navigate the wreckage of her life. Yet, amidst the despair, a flicker of something akin to resilience began to ignite. Slowly, arduously, she started to pick up the shattered remnants of her existence. Tiny, tentative steps at first, barely perceptible movements forward. She immersed herself in work, a temporary, undemanding job that offered a semblance of routine, a fragile anchor in the storm of her emotions. It wasn't glamorous, wasn't fulfilling, but it was something. A distraction, a purpose, a reason to get out of bed each morning, even when every fiber of her being screamed to stay hidden beneath the covers, swallowed by the darkness. She avoided the familiar, the reminders of her past life. Social circles, once a source of joy and validation, now felt like minefields of judgment and pity. She retreated, isolating herself in a smaller, more anonymous space, shedding the skin of her former life, desperately trying to create a new, unburdened existence. It was a silent world, a world without mirrors reflecting her shame, without framed memories mocking her failures. She sought not to return to who she was, but to build something new, something salvageable from the ashes. But even as she took these tentative steps forward, the wound remained open, raw, unyielding. Her relationship with her parents, fractured and strained since the scandal, remained a gaping chasm in her life. Pride, that brittle, ultimately useless shield, had kept her isolated, preventing her from seeking solace, from admitting her vulnerability. Dealing with her mother's disappointment, her father's heartbroken silence, felt more unbearable than any public humiliation, any financial ruin. Could she ever truly escape the shadow of her past? Could she ever forgive herself? The journey to rebirth, she was beginning to understand, would be long, arduous, and paved with the unyielding stones of regret. Daniel, too, embarked on his own arduous journey, a path winding away from the wreckage of his past. The pain was a constant companion, a dull ache in his chest, but it no longer defined him. He poured himself into work, finding solace in the familiar order of architecture, in the tangible creation of new spaces. Slowly, tentatively, he began to re-engage with the world, stepping back into the light after a long, dark night. And then Claire arrived. A quiet presence, a calming force in the storm-tossed sea of his emotions. She didn't rush him, didn't demand explanations, simply listened. She offered understanding, not pity, companionship, not pressure. He resisted at first, fear a tight knot in his stomach, fear of repeating the past, of trusting again, of loving again. But Clara was patient, persistent, her gentle presence a steady beacon in his uncertain world. Little by little, the ice around his heart began to thaw. He allowed himself to be seen, to be heard, to be cared for. He started to believe, cautiously, tentatively, in the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by the ghosts of betrayal, but illuminated by the gentle warmth of a new, unexpected love. His journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt a flicker of hope, a sense of peace slowly returning to his soul. This story, in its stark and unflinching portrayal, serves as a potent reminder: choices have consequences. Infidelity, a seemingly simple act of transgression, unravels the intricate tapestry of lives, leaving behind a trail of devastation. Homes crumble, trust shatters, and deep, agonizing scars are etched onto the soul. It's a harsh lesson brutally illustrated, showcasing the profound ripple effect of deceit and broken vows. But amidst the ruins, a fragile ember of hope flickers. Even in the darkest depths of despair, even after the most catastrophic falls, rebirth remains a possibility. The journey is arduous, paved with pain and regret, yet it offers a chance for profound growth, for a hard-won wisdom forged in the fires of suffering. Forgiveness, both of others and oneself, becomes a crucial, albeit difficult, path toward healing. This is not a tale that glorifies betrayal. Instead, it stands as a stark cautionary narrative, illuminating the destructive power of wrong choices, while simultaneously hinting at the resilient spirit of humanity, the enduring capacity to learn, to rebuild, and to, against all odds, begin again. The scars may remain, a permanent reminder of past mistakes, but they do not have to define the future. And so, another chapter from our collection of stories from the shadows comes to a close. The stories you just heard are not products of imagination, but shards of real lives, experiences that people have faced and overcome. We hope that through these stories, you found empathy, valuable lessons, or simply a moment of pause to reflect on life and the relationships around you. If this story touched your heart, if you felt these shares were meaningful, please continue to support our channel. Once again, we earnestly urge you to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with your friends and loved ones. Your support is invaluable motivation for us to continue searching for and bringing you meaningful stories, hidden corners of life, so we can all understand and cherish what we have even more. Thank you sincerely for your companionship, and we'll see you in the next story.